like a really personal question. What inspires you on this beautiful morning? Since I guess the sun, it's rising and we're sort of starting a new day. What inspires you today?
What inspires me this morning, I think I've been working now a lot in the ceramic studio, so I'm working on some new stuff there, and somehow that easiness is inspiring me. So if something is working well and it's kind of easy to do and it's not like a lot of hassle, I think that has been very inspiring, kind of easygoing, and some things are working just, so that has been good.
I think on this morning you sort of second in Tero in this thought of easiness. I made it here on this snowy morning. In my previous home city, New York, this would have been called a snow day. Metro closed, schools closed, everything closed. So it's wonderful to be in a society where things work.
Today's topic is design. We're in Finland, and Finnish design is one of my favorite cliches, if I may say so. But let's sort of talk around that a little bit. People usually throw that term Finnish design around without really thinking what it means in 2022. What's great about Finnish design at the moment?
So many things, of course. The whole kind of discipline of design is so broad. There's so many things included, from systemic design to fashion and crafts and all of that. And I think currently the most interesting things for me in design, be it Finnish design or any design, are maybe the way design is being used in systemic change. And I think a great example of that is for example, that one of the design awards this fall was awarded to the Finnish Tax Authority for using design and making their services more approachable and accessible and easy again. The other thing is how the sustainability crisis, climate change is driving design and driving change in design, and a few examples from there are Finnish innovations on materials. Like for example, Sulapack was producing innovative materials in biodegradable materials for oil and water-based cosmetics, adopted by #1 brands in the world, and vegetable Spinova that's creating fibers in the textile industry. And the third thing I think is kind of also a global phenomenon, but very much seen here, is kind of the new comeback of crafts. On a very personal level, a lot of people are using more old and trying more old crafts techniques and whatnot. But it's also kind of being adopted in the broader design field, like the comeback of old methods of crafts. And that's really beautiful.
Yeah, I totally agree on those. And if I think from the designer's perspective, I think what is great in Finnish design is the education. It's the free education and the very high quality education that we have and we can get in our schools. And of course, because from the education starts the innovation, starts the thinking of how you think ecological, all this. Because of course nowadays designers have to be very aware of the climate change, the crisis, all of this. So you have to kind of think very thoroughly why you are designing objects, or what is the kind of why you produce more when there is so much already. So you have to kind of somehow be sure and be kind of like not produce things on just because, but there is some reason why you want to do them. And for example, as you said about the craft, I think that's very interesting. I'm also working on that area, which is kind of interesting. When I started in 2016 my studies, I started, then there was still like ceramic and glass department that we studied 3 years, just ceramic and glass, which doesn't happen anymore, at least in Taikki or Aalto University as it is nowadays. So I think that was very interesting because on that time it was like the unsexiest thing was to be a ceramic artist. Like it was, because everything was online, everything was just this IT bubble. And it's very interesting to see these waves, how it goes, like, because now, of course, everything is possible by computer, you can 3D print everything or whatnot. But actually it's coming back that people want to do by their hands, and it's the craft movement, everything about this, it's very interesting, inspiring. And what I think about like Finnish design, because I was curating this exhibition a couple of years ago, which was like, they wanted, or the brief was that, show what is the kind of contemporary Finnish design, because of course we have the big heritage on our golden age, which is sometimes a little bit burden for a designer, because it's always you're compared to like Alvar Aalto and Marimekko and so on, which is very kind of interesting. But what I wanted to show in that exhibition was that there is actually like very creative thinkers. There is a lot of this art and design going together more or less, and then also this idea of kind of brave. I think there has been always this kind of big kind of that people are very brave to do, and they're doing very kind of in their own will. They don't try to follow the rules in a way in design, so I think that's very interesting.
You mentioned, and I know that in your work you're sort of studying also the sort of the line between art and design a lot, and that's a good segue for us to go into the museum section of the talk. Obviously, people are very excited about the new project, and I'm not going to repeat what you said over there about your job, but it's also, I mean, obviously, there's going to be a lot of discussion about the location, the building. What does it mean for Finland and Helsinki now to have this new museum project?
So maybe a little background. There's a new Museum of Architecture and Design being planned in Helsinki, which is something that's been in the plans for decades, I would say. But now finally there's a concrete plan, and I was hired to lead that project, which is of course the dream job, coming with the small challenges along the way, which I think Jani referred to. I think it's a fantastic opportunity for Finland. If there was one country in the world that is kind of expected to have an amazing institution on architecture and design, I think we all agree that it would be Finland, given our legacy. But it's really a way for us to show kind of the future of design and where design is leading, and also kind of tell the narrative of how we use design and architecture in building our functional welfare society, which is a super interesting topic at the moment, given our geopolitical situation. So, the way we're planning the museum, we're really trying to make it into a platform for the creative industries, for the design industries, and really bring something new into the city, into the country, into the industry that has global relevance and acts as a kind of a point of conversation in the global community.
Maybe the same question for you, but from your sort of personal designer point of view. Obviously, we've had a design museum, we've had the architecture museum, but now they're sort of combining into this new level. What does it mean to you to have this? It's going to be a lot more talk about design, and the focus is shifting to different things, maybe.
Yeah, of course, I'm very excited to see what it's going to be, and eager to hear kind of what kind of stuff or things are going to happen there. And yeah, I'm just very positively waiting what is going to happen. And yeah, I'm just happy to see how it's going to be.
I know that in your interviews and in some of the PR materials, you've referred to the new project, a new museum, as that the level has to be the world's best museum, which is it's a sort of good goal to have. But can you talk about a little bit what that means? I mean, obviously, in terms, you mentioned that in terms of how people use the building, or it's not something, I guess, other than the traditional music. But what do you mean by being the world's best?
It would be quite sad to say that we're establishing the world's second or something. So you have to aim high, of course. So yes, we're merging two existing museums: the Museum of Architecture and the Museum of Design, which are located in buildings that were never meant to be museums. But the idea is not to solve their spatial solutions, but really to found a new institution, and not a museum where there's architecture and design, but sort of gives a holistic approach on these, how these creative fields have shaped our society. And I think, as I said, given our legacy in architecture and design, I think we have an amazing opportunity to really create something that seen as the best in the world in telling the narrative of the use of design in creating change. And I think sort of in the context of our city and our country, I think the world's best doesn't need to mean that it's the biggest or most expensive building or most amazing something, but it's really about the context and kind of being sort of a human scale museum. I think that's really what we're trying to create. Sort of in the way that Audi has shifted the definition of libraries, I think with this museum we're also trying to shift what we think about when we think about museums. Maybe 20 years ago, I actually graduated from that same department in previous, like that ceramics and glass department. Maybe back in the day, ceramics is not too sexy, and maybe now we don't think museums as such a sexy word, but hopefully in 10 years time, when we have that museum in the Etelä-Ranta, South Harbor, Helsinki, we will think that, wow, that's a sexy institution.
I'm very excited to hear that there's going to be like a space where people can mingle and kind of come together, and I think that's kind of very interesting for me when I think museums is kind of place where you can go and hang and just you can go there alone and experience it just by yourself, or you can go there with friends or people or whatever, and it's kind of, as you said about the Audi, I think that's such a kind of great example of like that you create this amazing space for just the citizens to go, and I think that's definitely like such a big thing that we shouldn't take for granted, that we have this opportunity or we are given these kind of amazing spaces where you just can go and experience. And I was just there like last weekend, and there was the other side of the border, there was the children's mayhem happening, which I found it was very interesting because it was snowy day, so I guess everybody went there with the kids. So it was just kind of funny idea that we have now this museum, very high tech or like a high-end design place, and then there's the children just going around and going crazy.
I think Audi is a really good reference. I just by chance happened to be after Audi was open. I was traveling in the US, and I happened to go into Seattle and visited the Remo Koolhaas Design Museum there. And my first thought was, somebody from Audi has been here. I understand how you stretch the sort of the idea of a library. Coming back to you, I mean, what are your favorite museums in the world? Like, I know that literally there's a new museum in New York, which is a great place, but do you have any sort of maybe ideas that we could inspire from in like places wise?
Well, I think like one of the most like something that was very amazing for me was actually New York. So I was doing there 1 year ago. I did a residence in New York, and I traveled there like just after the pandemic, or I could travel from Europe. And I went in this Dia Beacon museum, which is just like 1 hour from New York, upstate, and it's this big space. I think it's all like cardboard factory or something, but they have done this very, like the space itself is so huge, and it's full of this kind of very, I would say it's kind of minimalistic art, but it's just done so well that it just blows your mind, and the scale of the space. I was there in I think Saturday, and I felt that I was just going on alone there in this big space because it's so big, so people kind of disappear there. And that was just kind of very effective for me. I don't know, was it the kind of best museum in a way, because it was kind of very traditional museum. There wasn't anything kind of interactive. It's just that there is a big space full of art, and you go around there. But that was something that was very, very nice.
You could actually just talk about what's your favorite New York museum, because there's so many amazing institutions in New York alone. Dia Beacon is fabulous. It's a wonderful kind of example of how one person's vision can create something truly amazing. I think I did a little interview with recently, I think I mentioned the Gucci Museum, which is also a museum in New York, kind of focusing on one designer's sculptures legacy, and that's a beautiful place because it's kind of the opposite of the Beacon. It's a very small sort of human scale museum and kind of a small meditation when you go there into that little garden. And then another favorite in New York, which is a wonderful example of how different museums can be, is the Tenement Museum. That's a museum on lower Manhattan, which is a museum about immigration, about how people immigrated into New York. And it's actually there's not a museum space. There's a shop, and then the whole museum is about these tours. It's about these walking tours, and then in and around that neighborhood there are apartments and spaces, old storefronts and so on, where you visit, and then through those spaces the guides tell you the story of how immigration shaped New York. That's one of my favorites.
Also, actually, when we talk about human scale, I also love in Helsinki that we have this home museum. So Taidekohti Kirppilä is, for example, one of my favorites, because it's a house in Töölö which collector just collected art decades, and now it's a museum for people to go. And I love those kind of places also, that it's kind of very intimate, and you feel that you are in somebody's home.
Yeah, it's sort of a dictionary definition of best kept secret, because not a lot of people know that, and let's keep it that way, because you don't want long lines there. Obviously, there's a lot of opportunities, possibilities with the new project. Maybe taking a little bit the negative point of view here as well, because I noticed that once you sort of publish the plans for the South Eteläranta, a lot of people are talking. But soon it becomes city politics. What are the big challenges in a project like this? I know you must have thought about them as well.
Of course, there are challenges. I think it's always more interesting to talk about the opportunities, but yeah, it's I mean, obviously, as I said, this museum has been planned for decades and it's never made it. So there's been plenty of challenging in finding funding and finding sort of a way to do it. But now there's really strong commitment from both the city of Helsinki, state of Finland. These two museums are really excited to merge and become something new, and we have a lot of backing from a number of private funders too. So the kind of the funding base is really broad, and the commitment and the will to make this happen is super strong. So I'm quite positive. We're about to hand the project plan of the museum next spring to the decision makers, and then we will sign their checks, and then we can move forward. And the first step then will be opening of a design competition for the new museum building, which will hopefully happen next summer, which is of course an exciting moment and a moment that will gather a lot of international recognition. So that's an exciting next step in the project.
Already maybe in the design project part, but once it's finished, it has to be sort of, obviously the public is a big part, designer is really a big part. Maybe a question for both of you from different sides. What is the best way to engage the community, different communities in this new project? Tero, you can go. You can ask for anything now.
Well, I guess it's just to kind of keep it as open as possible and have these kind of open competitions, just keep it open and letting people know, and I guess invite different background people to be part of the process, but yeah.
That's exactly the way, that's what we've been trying to do, and of course that work will continue once we open the design competition next summer. It'll be probably 5 years from there before the actual museum building opens. So there's plenty of opportunities to be involved and be engaged in the process of kind of planning the museum and have your voice heard. One of the interesting challenges is how to make the design competition more sort of participatory. That's something that we've been discussing a lot with the architecture community and the Association of Architects in Finland. So that's a great challenge.
Maybe going into the creativity topic and maybe on a more personal level now we're at Unity Jätkäsaari here, which is it's a place where people actually combine work and rest. I used to talk about the work-life balance, but then I was taught that it's usually now mentioned as work-life blend. So can you talk about your personal work-life blend? How do you combine? Because I know that once you work with creativity or creative people or the design world or anything, I guess now it can be really hard. But how do you find time for leisure, and how do you combine? What's your blend?
I guess I'm quite, in a way, strict how I work. That I try to not work in the evenings. I try to keep this kind of, in a way, office hour balance. Of course, it's not working always, but definitely as I'm working mostly like in my studio, or if I'm doing ceramics, for example, of course it's very, like, you have to be there and it takes time. But then I try to kind of have also outside activities, not like go and do sport or whatever it is, have movie nights or whatever, so that it doesn't kind of consume all of your time, because it's easy that you're just go and do, and then you feel that you're exhausted. And then normally I take like 2 months summer holiday and go to Spain, so that's big kind of thing where I can then relax and have new ideas and so forth. So really kind of, I think it's to find the balance is also that you just make it happen in a way that you put it in, or kind of decided I'm not working for weekends, I only work for these and these times.
With the deadline of the museum plan approaching, my work and life is very well blended at the moment. I think currently kind of relaxing means getting on a couch after work day and binging Aikuiset or something like that. But my next summer's plan, I actually became a gardener in the pandemic years, which has been a wonderful thing. But I recently tried the potter's wheel, so that was so wonderful. I could still somewhat do it, and now my plan is for next summer is to build a little studio. So that's the next sort of relaxation plan, that I will have a place where I can put my hands on clay and just stare at the wheel.
Yeah, and I think actually, I'm happy to hear that you're going back this round. That's very exciting. And yeah, I think for me actually, because so many times like the actual work is very relaxing for me, like doing with my hand. When I'm working with ceramic, it's so meditative, and sometimes I don't think it as work so much. So maybe that's also kind of easier than to kind of blend it, or itself is kind of relaxing. But of course, if you have, for example, a project or whatever, then I'm also looking at a lot of Aikuiset or whatever online.
It's a really good tip. I have to start thinking that when I'm making that PowerPoint presentation and I'm working with my hands, that it's much more inspiring next time. Tero, your work it's very humor. There's a lot of humor in it and sort of joy. And I know that I already asked you the question what inspires you, but you mentioned that actually these 2 months that you spent in New York inspired the last exhibition and those objects. Can you talk a little bit about that project?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, as I mentioned, I was 2 months, like 1 year ago, in like November. Like December, November, what is? Anyway, sorry, I'm not a morning person. Anyway, so yeah, I was in New York, and it has been like lifelong dream to go there, and I supposed to went there already like 2019, but of course then pandemic and everything happened. So I could travel last year, and I went actually like the next day that you could go from Europe to States without the 2-week quarantine, so it was a little bit like jump to unknown. But it was such a kind of inspiring time, and what I did, I was just kind of going around the city, kind of going a lot of museums, getting this kind of, I don't know, thoughts or inspiration, I guess. So, and then when I came back from the residency, I did this September, I did an exhibition from that called Playing with Fire. So what I get kind of from the residency, like for example, this smiley face that I used a lot in that exhibition that you're seeing in the plastic bags in New York, like this "Have a nice day," and these kind of small details that I found it just very interesting and inspiring. I like pickles and food and stuff and hot dogs, and this kind of, what I was already kind of interested when I went there was this kind of iconic shapes, and I was trying to kind of find in New York kind of New York icons in a way. So for example, these water tanks that are on the rooftops, that was one theme that I worked in ceramic, and then the smiley face and that kind of fast food culture in all. And it was very interesting because normally my kind of way to do is I go very hands-on. If I have an idea, I start to kind of do it right away, which is of course when you work with ceramic is possible and kind of very handy. And because in New York I didn't have like a work studio, I just had the apartment. So I actually had to do a lot of like drawing, which I normally don't do. So that was kind of interesting and way to think, or of course it's not like groundbreaking to make drawings from the ideas, but for me it was kind of new way to communicate the ideas or kind of remember the ideas.
Kaarina, obviously Tero was in New York after you already were in Finland, but you've seen these designers come to and spend that residency time there. Maybe I'm always interested in this idea of like there's this old Finnish joke that what do they think about us? Like everybody's thinking, all the Finns are thinking, what are they thinking about us? But it's sort of, I think it captures something about sort of the cultural exchange, the idea of that. And obviously travel is not the same as it was before. You can't maybe travel all the time, but I think it's really essential, especially in the creative job, to sort of switch your ideas around. Going back to an actual question, how does it? What's your experiences with obviously seeing a lot of designers come to New York and have that sort of experience? I think it's great that Tero has put it into words that actually the times he spent there helped to create with the exhibition, which was really fun. And a quick plug that if you're not familiar with Tero's work, he just opened the web store. You should visit that too.
Yes.
But how you've seen New York as a place affect a lot of people, designers. Can you tell us something about that?
What's the question again?
Sorry, yeah, that's my trademark. That's no question.
Yeah, obviously, I mean, yeah, I worked in New York for 5 years, and one of the big things that we did was we arranged residencies for Finnish designers and architects and contemporary artists, and of course, given the recent challenges in travel, and of course, the way we should definitely reduce travel because of climate change, still, I think it's essential for people working in the creative fields to be immersed in other surroundings and new surroundings and change ideas and get inspired, and I think that dialogue is something that is crucial for society, our societies, and especially after the pandemic, there was so much kind of us getting wrapped just in our own little bubbles and ideas. So I think after the pandemic, sort of the freedom to travel again, having sustainability in mind, of course, I think it is crucial. And seeing this kind of the shift that happened, even due to a short couple of months residency period in New York, seeing shift happen in people's practices, I think it sort of felt very, very meaningful in the way you described how your work kind of developed through that time. And there's other people in the room who I think also the New York experience had a great impact on their practice. I think that's kind of proven to be a good recipe, and also vice versa. community that we work with in New York really look up to Finnish designers and architects and creative people in the creative field, and really are really open to sharing ideas and learning and especially I think sort of ideas towards sustainability and sort of societal design and that sort of thing really resonate in New York. I mentioned Vero, the tax authority here, and I think the IRS could learn from Vero business and really great design. It's a big change.
I have to also say like the Vero has the best Insta and TikTok like game, so it's kind of very funny.
Yeah, I think that was maybe 10 years ago. Estonia they were using designers to design the actual like the user interface of how to pay taxes, so it became fun. But I think Finland sort of went level up, and people are laughing in a good way at the tax office. The traveling is a great point, because I think obviously it's the inspiring part, but I think the very important part is also sort of see your place in the world. So it's not only the new ideas, but also new ideas about yourself. I think that's a really good point. But maybe sort of before we go into the multiple audience questions that are sort of, I can feel them coming from the audience. Maybe sort of go the other way around of not getting inspired, but I think we touched on sort of the Finnish design legacy, the new museum and sustainability. What would be the things that Finland could sort of teach the world right now, or export the best at the moment? Like what are the things that you would go if you go to New York right now? What would you take with you, ideas wise?
Snow shoveling.
Yeah, when I was there, I went in this ICFF, which is like the big fair, and I was in shock how bad it was. So I was actually I was kind of interested, like maybe sometimes the quality thinking of quality I would take. So not only like just produce stuff because of money or kind of because you can or we have to do it, but think it through the quality and like doing it very well.
During my time in New York, we did a project during ICF or New York Design Week around zero waste. We did a little pop-up restaurant around zero waste and how design and food in food meet in creating a more sustainable kind of hospitality culture, and I knew the project was relevant and I knew it had a great message, but actually the way it resonated really surprised me. It was kind of featured in pretty much all design and architecture magazines all around the world, and it became sort of the talk of the town, our small little project, highlighting Finnish food culture around zero waste, highlighting Finnish designers, material innovations like I mentioned before. That's really something where we have a big position to take and a big narrative to tell how we're taking sustainability into focus in our design culture.
One question popped into my mind from that. Since we have the designers, we have the museum here, and you mentioned the food culture and all these cultures, obviously a place like Unity where a lot of people from different areas work together. Maybe you could solve this problem still as a last thing. How do we sort of help the people sort of hop the genre lines and more sort of creative work together? What's the key to the sort of combining all these fields from maybe say music to design to food and it could be a museum, but just give us your answer.
That's also something I love to work with. Like if I've been creating, for example, an exhibition, I want to bring there like fashion photography and like design objects and then like food culture and whatever. So I think that's very fruitful and like very important to put together the genres in a way, because it's still kind of quite often that if you have, for example, exhibition, it's either design or art or architect. So of course, it's like I'm very excited to see the new museum, how it will be together more. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's just make projects to combine these things and be kind of brave to combine things that are maybe not like the first things that come on your mind, but just go for it.
Happy Sibelius's birthday, by the way. So you mentioned music, so it's the official day of Finnish music today. So it's a great day to celebrate Finnish culture again. I say it's the museum. We need the museum for making that happen. But yeah, I mean, obviously, like Tero mentioned, meeting of different kinds of minds, meeting of different kinds of disciplines, meeting people of different backgrounds is kind of essential into creating something new, and that's I've been also focusing on my work a lot. And I just really believe in people coming together like this to talk. Eating is a great way to bring people together, and that's why I've been so fascinated by food culture and also trying to create something really exciting around food and design in the new museum to be a platform for people coming together around a social situation. I think the best ideas often come from those kinds of situations.
Well, I want to thank you, the audience, and I want to thank Tero and Kaarina for your time. Great talk. Thanks everyone. See you next time.